My relationship with horror is a lifelong romance. Naturally, no one begins their journey with heavy hitters like Hellraiser or Cannibal Holocaust. The gateway usually leads through either horror comedy or family-friendly spooky animation. In my case, as a young kid, I loved the original Scooby-Doo cartoon. Then I discovered the real adventures of Jonny Quest, which was noticeably scarier and actually violent. However, the series that truly pulled me into proper horror was the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy. It struck the perfect balance, being an uncompromisingly dark and wickedly funny cartoon packed with surprisingly adult themes and references. I didn't actually catch most of these until I rewatched the show in my 20s. Only then did it hit me just how much adult-oriented content was woven into that Cartoon Network production. That's one of the hidden benefits of revisiting old cartoons. Beyond the sweet nostalgia, and usually enjoying higher quality writing and animation compared to what we have today, you also get to uncover all kinds of weird allusions that past writers managed to slip in under the radar.
Rest in here, darling.
Hey, that's not restful.
Hunting down these golden nuggets is a highly enjoyable game in itself. In this video, I'm going to highlight some of the many references to adult themes that I came across while rewatching the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy recently. I couldn't come up with an objective way of measuring the adultness to rank these scenes accordingly, so instead, I decided to be flexible with my criteria and create several categories of adult references. Thus, my list is not a traditional ranking. It consists of the most striking examples within each category. You can decide for yourself which of the scenes presented was the most inappropriate overall. With that out of the way, let's discuss the first category. It's interesting how a lack of clothes can be used just as effectively to arouse us as to make us laugh. There seems to be a strange but natural intersection of comedy and erotica. Occasionally, the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy depicts characters not wearing anything, but it's always played exclusively for laughs, in line with the wacky cartoon logic. However, the episode titled Duck includes a hilarious moment that, for once, breaks from this convention.
Look at me, buddy! Look at me, buddy! Look at it! Look at it!
The whole episode is a running fart joke. At one point, Grim tries to prove to a group of kids that it wasn't him who just farted, explaining that he's a skeleton and has no guts. He exposes himself and repeatedly tells them to look at his body. A cop sees this and arrests him for being a flasher and possibly a predator. It's a great joke, elevated by perfect timing, but I still can't believe the writers went there. Grim might not have guts, but the show's writers definitely do. Let's move to the second category, which is movies that the show's target audience, so older kids and possibly teenagers as well, could not or should not know for a number of reasons. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy was a show that loved to spoof popular movies. During its run, we got to enjoy a wickedly subversive spin on Harry Potter and The Lord of the Rings, franchises with a lot of appeal to younger audience. But the list goes on. Hoss Delgado, one of my absolute favorite recurring characters on the show, is based on Snake Plissken from John Carpenter's Escape from New York and Ash from the Evil Dead series. These movies are rated R and NC-17, so referencing them in a cartoon is a bold choice. That said, aside from Hoss's appearance and the fact that he's a monster hunter, there's little that connects him to the original IPs. However, there's an episode called Billy Idiot, in which Billy receives a scholarship to study at a dance academy. Eventually, he discovers that the institution is run by a coven of witches. Despite sharing some plot points with the musical Billy Elliot, the episode is primarily a spoof of Suspiria, a 1977 supernatural horror film by Dario Argento, famous for its gore. Sure, in terms of violence, Billy Idiot is just a regular episode of Billy and Mandy. Still, Suspiria is quite a risque choice of a movie to reference in a kid's cartoon. However, the choice that really takes the cake in this category is the 1987 Clive Barker classic, Hellraiser. The episode, aptly named The Show That Dare Not Speak Its Name, sees Billy finding a puzzle box in Grimm's trunk. He opens it, and then a Cenobite-like figure appears. The creature is called Pinface, for rather obvious reasons.
They call me Pinface.
Why did they call you that?
Look closely.
Interestingly enough, this episode also features a female Pinhead, long before the 2022 reboot. While Suspiria was an R-rated movie, the original Hellraiser received an X rating. Deservedly so, because it's a famously violent, bloody, and disturbing horror film. The episode itself is not, and Pinhead is portrayed as a rather pathetic character. Still, the very idea of spoofing a gorefest like Hellraiser in a show for kids has to be the most extreme pick of all. I will close this topic with one more mention, which touches on another meaning of the word adult. In the world of Billy and Mandy, the classic universal monsters such as Dracula, the Bride of Frankenstein, and the Wolfman exist and live in a retirement home. No wonder, since all of these movies were initially released in the 1930s and 40s. They're coded as old. Even if you haven't seen the original black and white versions, you get the reference and the joke. However, you will notice that this Dracula is not a play on the classic Bela Lugosi incarnation. This one is taken from the 1972 movie Blacula, which inspired a wave of blaxploitation-themed horror movies in the 1970s. This Dracula is sexy, listens to funk, is a great dancer, and refers to himself in the third person.
I'm sorry, honey, baby. Dracula sorry too. Sorry you so old and ugly now.
He and Horst Delgado have always been my favorite characters on the show. But I have to admit, referencing an obscure fad that was already 30 years old at the time of Billy and Mandy's release is really funny, but also head-scratching. This might sound controversial, but I appreciate innuendos in cartoons. I see them as a creative game that the writers play with the audience. These allusions go entirely over kids' heads, but older viewers get them and might enjoy a naughty laugh because of them. Clips in this category focus on references to people having fun with each other. Two really stood out to me. First, let's talk about Owen, who is a friend of Billy's and has a crush on Mandy. Over the course of the series, we are introduced to Owen's immediate family. First, we meet his dad, who has a funny tendency to overuse the word dude. Later, we meet his grandma. Then, in a hilarious episode called Dracula Must Die, which might be a play on the title of a Hammer Frankenstein movie, we discover that the vampire is Owen's grandfather. At that point, we know everyone on the paternal side of his family. But what about his mother? Eventually, we find out that Owen's mom is an ancient Egyptian mummy. I love puns, by the way. This makes Owen a quarter vampire and a half mummy, which is a plot point that comes back in the movie Underfist, Halloween Bash. This, of course, begs the question, how did Owen's parents manage to conceive a child?
We've managed to make it work all these years, leaving a whole lot of questions that don't need to be answered.
Yeah, but how did you and Erwin's mom...
Leaving a whole lot of questions that don't need to be answered.
Apparently, in the traditional way, that is, through the power of love. In the words of Alice Cooper, Irwin's dad loves the dead. Let's move to a slightly less perverted topic now. The episode entitled Here Tha Be Dwarves is a hilarious spoof of The Lord of the Rings and explores the legendary hatred between elves and dwarves. At one point, Billy accidentally finds the gates of Moria, which are covered in all kinds of signs and graffiti. There, he notices a sign.
For a good time called...
What are you doing? Who said you can read our sacred door?
If you're of a certain age, you know precisely what that means. This is barely an innuendo. It baffles me how the writers of Billy and Mandy were able to get away with such an overt reference to sex. Hats off. I have an honorable mention for you as well. Whenever dealing with hidden meanings, you always risk simply reading too much into things. With this scene, I just don't know.
I'm so excited, I feel like my heart's about to burst.
Irwin is on a boat with a hypnotized Mandy. He says that his heart is about to burst, and then a fountain of water gushes from between his legs. We are shown exactly how this transpires, so there's no confusion about the nature of this fluid and where it comes from. This scene either exists to deliver a rather lame wordplay, or is a really dirty visual gag, pornographic in nature. Actually, since I enjoy innuendos and puns so much, before we move to the fourth category, here are 3 honorable mentions.
I'm a dirty boy!
I'm a dirty boy!
What do you mean you can tell when someone fakes?
Trust me, I know. I think I like having skin.
A lot of skin.
Hey!
Let's move to the next, somewhat similar category, fetishes. While I enjoy innuendos in cartoons, I have mixed feelings when it comes to hidden references to objects, activities, or certain body parts that some people might like a bit too much.
You gotta see her ankles.
God, I swear, 1 in 5 guys.
This is probably because the search for innuendos is primarily an intellectual activity that brings gratification in the form of amusement. As I said before, it's more or less a game that writers play with their older viewers, and I see no harm in it. Meanwhile, there's something sleazy about writers and animators putting their characters in certain positions because it turns them on. If you're in the same club, you might appreciate such an identifiable signal, but if you're not, then you're left with a sense of feeling dirty. It's like walking in on someone. That person is clearly having fun with whatever they're doing, but you didn't need or want to know that. Anyway, I wanted to highlight a scene from the episode The Love That Dare Not Speak Its Name. Yes, the title seems oddly familiar. In the episode, Billy falls in love with his lookalike Blandy, who is actually a shape-shifting monster. He's obsessed with her to such a degree that he keeps her sock to remember her by. He sniffs it and licks it. Maybe the writers were trying to show how gross Billy is, as they often did, but something tells me there's more to this scene. I mean, this seems like something Quagmire would do. Him or Bling Bling Boy from Jonny Quest.
Susan said she'd rather date Barf, but I grabbed one of her sneakers. I know how you like her feet.
On the other hand, Billy's obsession with the smell of his own feet was established in a different episode, so you might say this is an example of the writers keeping continuity in check. I also have an honorable mention. There's a scene that I'm not sure references a certain kink, but it very well may. In the episode Prank Call of Cthulhu, Irwin, in his monster form, calls his teacher. She answers the phone and hears his grunting noises and heavy breathing. She seems disgusted but keeps listening and says that he has 5 minutes to stop.
That's disgusting.
I'll give you 5 minutes to stop making that noise.
Why 5 minutes? Why doesn't she end the call immediately? Either this is a comment on how nowadays teachers can't really stand up to students anymore and have to tolerate their behavior, or Miss Butterbean secretly enjoys the heavy breather. I would guess the latter. As discussed previously in one of my Jonny Quest videos, the classic Universal monsters have a curious potential to be made child-friendly. Even though Dracula drinks blood, werewolves are ferocious killers, and mummies and the Frankenstein monster are walking corpses. We've seen them star in children's cartoons many times, sometimes even as the main protagonists. Drak Pack comes to mind as an example. I actually remember an episode of that show where Drak and Howler made fun of the monster, referred to as Frankie, for being afraid of cemeteries, even though he comes from one. By the way, is this an innuendo in your opinion?
Drak Pack, calling Big D. What's this? Can't a retired vampire take a bubble bath? But Big D, don't interrupt!
Anyway, zombies, on the other hand, don't seem to possess the same child-friendly quality as the Universal monsters. Sure, we've seen them in cartoons as early as in the original Scooby-Doo show back in 1969. There's also the notorious Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island movie from 1998, which is arguably the most extreme iteration of that franchise. But in general, we don't really see The Walking Dead in cartoons for kids. Billy and Mandy didn't hold back, though. The show featured zombies and zombified people on several occasions, probably most notably in the Little Rock of Horrors episode, which features the talents of Aurelio Voltaire, the king of the dark cabaret genre.
Brains, I'm alright. I need the brains to zombified.
Instead, I would like to highlight a particularly gruesome episode called He's Not Dead, He's My Mascot, where Grim brings a cat back from the dead. There's something truly disturbing about seeing Billy play with a rotting corpse of a pet, and even remove its head. And I'm not even a cat person. It's weird how cultural taboos work. I don't get freaked out by a human zombie, but an animal one does the trick.
This cat is better than Fluffy Cat. He smells just as bad. And has a removable head. Ah!
Honestly, I don't mind cartoon violence and gross-out humor, but this rotting cat is probably the only thing in this entire show that almost disturbs me. Well, this and that walking corpse Grim once dated. Speaking of cultural taboos, certain bodily fluids tend to be perceived as grosser than others. You know what I mean? For some reason, boogers and vomit are seen as gross but funny, while urine and especially poop are just gross. Billy and Mandy features scenes with characters sneezing on each other and even vomiting, but that's not really shocking. After all, the 1990s and 2000s were arguably the golden age of gross-out humor. The show does venture into poop jokes, though, and that is shocking. For example, on 2 separate occasions, we are shown that Howard, Billy's dad, for some reason likes to take a dump in the bushes, especially in his neighbor's garden. However, the episode that takes the cake is That's My Mummy, which features a running joke of Billy using dog poo as shampoo.
Here, Billy, a nice bag of shampoo, fresh from the front yard.
I appreciate the pun, but that's really gross. Also, that's too stupid, even for Billy.
You guys got to try this. It's deliciosis. And it makes great shampoo.
And so, that's my list. I consciously didn't include certain adult topics because I tried to keep this video light and not political. What do you think about including adult references and dirty jokes in kids' cartoons? Which one of these did you find the most inappropriate and why? Let's have a discussion about it. I'm honestly interested in learning about other people's sensitivities and cultural taboos. For example, I remember that during the initial run of Family Guy in Poland, the only episode that actually got censored was the one when the Pope visits Quahog. Of all topics, that one was considered to be crossing the line. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please like, share it, and leave a comment. Bye.
Wait, I'm getting a vibration from my master. There!